Thanks. Okay. Thank you for the two wonderful speeches. And now let's move to the panel discussion. This time, we have invited several very well-known researchers as the panelists for discussion. We have Roni Hadani from the University of Texas at Austin, Emmanuel Viterbo at Monash University, who both of them have just gave the keynote speeches. And we also have Professor Jinhong Yuan from University of New South Wales, and Professor Hong Yihong from Monash University, and Professor Arman Farhan from Trinity College Dublin, and Professor Zhiqiang Wei from FAU Erlangen-Nuremberg. Let's welcome them. We have collected several questions regarding the OTFS, and we have tried to summarize them in different aspects. As the researchers here are quite well known with the concept, and we are thinking with those experts involved in today's panel discussion, maybe we can go it in a more non-official, that people can share our opinions with the topics. Because the questions, some of them are quite detailed, and perhaps we do not have enough time to discuss very details of each question. So I suggest the panelists could give some basic ideas towards those questions. Okay, so the first one, please join me to let's have a discussion on the delayed Doppler domain channel characteristics. Here are some questions in this aspect. People are focusing on the typical coherence time and coherence bandwidth in delayed Doppler domain, and also how to measure, is there any real world measured data to prove the properties of delayed Doppler domain, and also how well the fractional delay or fractional Doppler, for example, affect OTFS design. For all the experts, if you have any ideas and would like to say something about these questions, please just go ahead and unmute yourself. Thanks.
I have one remark. I can start.
Yeah,
regarding coherence types. Do you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
So the way I understand it is the following. I said it before. So if you accept quasi-periodicity and you accept twisted convolution, then inside an OTFS frame, you have a complete coherence. It's like you measure the channel at a certain point in the plane, and you can apply the same channel by means of twisted convolution to every other point. So inside the frame, and the frame can be as long as you want, and the bandwidth can be as wide as you want, you have, in this regard, coherence. Among frames, that's a different question, and there are, of course, similarities between the channel that you measure in one frame and consequent frame, but in particular, the delayed Doppler characteristics might be similar, but phases will be different, and so you cannot just assume that you are going to measure the same channel. So inside the frame, coherence. In between frame, certain attributes are slowly varying, and other attributes need to be estimated and predicted. So that's the way I see it.
There is one limitation in how long you can do your frame, because eventually the car moves, so it will see a slightly different geometry of the scene. So it's a matter of scale, but
that's true.
That's the limit. That's the limit. The geometric coherence time, let's call it, is important.
Yeah. But still, even if things are moving, at least on the pure level, what happens when something is moving or something is accelerating? The delayed Doppler channel model is maintained. It's just that you don't have any more the interpretation of specular reflector. For example, if you have an accelerating object, what you are going to get is an impulse response which is smeared by some kind of a shear. It's still a delayed Doppler. Impulse response. But it's not. You cannot interpret it as a reflector. It's not a delta. It's smeared impulse response. It's going to affect the symbol by means of twisted convolution, and all the stationarity things that I just said will maintain, but you know, the physical interpretation is different. So
yes. So
if I could add, sorry.
Oh yeah, of course, Professor.
Oh yeah,
thank you. Yeah, if I could add, I think we probably be a little bit careful about the terminology here. And
right.
The coherence time, coherence bandwidth, when we use it in typical wireless communication textbook, I think we are measuring wide sense stationary channel. Means that is defined from the channel scattering function. So we have a conventional Doppler spread, then you have the inverse of Doppler spread is your coherence time, means within that period of time, the channel does not change. But when we talk about channel, we are talking about the time frequency domain channel. And similarly, when we talk about coherence bandwidth, we are talking about you have a delay spread, and inverse of that is your coherence bandwidth. Again, we are talking about the channel amplitude in the time frequency domain. That's not change. But now I think with the introduction of OTFS, I think Ronnie and Emmanuel already mentioned we are talking about the different domains or different plane, if I would like to say, this delay Doppler. We probably change the terminology a little bit as well. We are not measuring the scattering function. We are measuring the correlation function, or you can think about the correlation of scattering function. So to me, I think I think some textbook mentioned rather than coherence time, coherence bandwidth in the delay Doppler domain, they talk about the stationary time and the stationary bandwidth. Basically, if you have Doppler does not change, so the inverse of your Doppler give you stationary time, means within that time, the channel in the delay Doppler domain, your Doppler does not change. Similarly, and you have a correlation of delay. So the correlation delay means within that time, your delay does not change. So you will have what we call it the coherent, not coherent, stationary. So yes. Obviously, your if you have a coherence time and bandwidth, give you small region, you call it a coherent region. Later on, your stationary region measures what is the range. You have a wide sense stationary. I think probably that. Yes. I just would like to add that a little bit.
Yeah, just hi everyone. Following up on that a bit. So one important point is that OTFS looks at a dynamic scenario where the channel changes, but they consider, in my understanding, the channel to be almost LTI over a subset of samples, which is in the looking at delay time domain. So in the delay dimension, your channel is almost LTI. So that's where the channel is, if you want to call it coherent or whatever, you can just consider it that way. But from radar perspective also, that's different. You want to capture everything. So yeah, I agree that the terminology is not probably the right one to use, like coherence time and bandwidth here. But we should consider all the domains that, for example, Ronnie showed in a very nice figure there. So we are moving always between delay time, delay Doppler, time frequency, frequency Doppler. So we have all these different domains that we can look at the channel and take advantage of the properties there.
Yes. Thank you, Arman. I think what experts has mentioned, they are quite representative for this type of questions. Like, I think the delay Doppler domain channels, they do have some different properties compared to the time frequency or time delay. Given the time limitation, maybe we could move on to the second aspect, which is the OTFS principles and designs. People has asked quite a lot about the some several details of the OTFS modulation. Perhaps we can focusing on the first, the time domain post-shaping and time frequency domain windowing, and the ISFFT and the OTFS grid. Please, please just feel free to discuss if you have any suggestions or opinions.
Hi, maybe I can add a little bit about the time frequency domain windowing. Sure. It is mainly useful to improve the sparsity of the delay Doppler domain channel, particularly for a fractional Doppler or fractional delay. If we have a fractional delay of Doppler, the channel will spread in the delay Doppler domain, which result in a very severe inter-Doppler interference and inter-delay interference. So, impose a window in the time frequency domain is equivalent to introduce a filter in the delay Doppler domain, such that the channel spreading can be suppressed in such a to some degree, and the resulting channel and the interference patterns in the delay Doppler domain will be more neat to be equalized or to be estimated.
Yes, thank you, Zhiqiang. I agree with you. Do we have any opinions on windowing and post-shaping here?
I would
of course,
reiterate what Zhiqiang said, because it's very correct. So as I said, delay Dopplers, there is something which you should call delay Doppler signal processing. In the same way that you have signal processing in time, a filter is a function that operates by means of convolution. That's what it means to filter in time. In frequency signal processing, a filter is a function on frequencies and operates by multiplication. So there is a concept of filtering in each one of these incarnations of signal processing. In delay Doppler signal processing, a filter is a function, not quasi-periodic, just on the delay Doppler domain, and it acts by means of twisted convolution on quasi-periodic signals. Now take all the intuition and all the knowledge that you have about the meaning and the utility of filtering in classical signal processing and translate it to this two-dimensional reality. By shaping the filter, you are shaping the physics of the signal. You are shaping the attributes of the signal that you are transmitting and the attributes of the signals you are receiving from the perspective of the delay Doppler representation.
Thank you, Ronnie. Yeah. I remember that Professor Viterbo has also another paper talking about using a different kernel other than ISFT for modulation. Maybe I'm not sure. Yeah, if you would like to add some comments on
that. Yeah,
thank you.
I can comment. I mentioned it at the end. In fact, I can comment on that. So unfortunately, it destroys the beauty of OTFS because the channel is in delay Doppler, and you know, the OTFS or the ZAC transform is perfectly matched to that model. But in it just happens to work well because although in the Hadamard, we call that, instead of the delay Doppler domain, we call that the delay sequency domain, because the equivalent notion of frequency for Hadamard transform is called sequency. And in that domain, the channel is not sparse as much as in the time is in delay Doppler, but it's also not that dense. So you just have a little bit more samples, more paths, equivalent paths in this delay sequency domain, which again, it doesn't hurt for our detection because of that MRC detection is kind of insensitive to having many paths along the sequency or the Doppler domain. So that's why it was, and then it happens to, it's still whatever you think of what is the DFT doing, it's spreading, spreading symbols across the entire vector. So you apply the DFT of a pulse, you get flat. something spread everywhere. So what all the transforms end up doing that, in particular, Hadamard transform is a constant modulus, which means they're just plus and minus ones, which is kind of even simpler than the Fourier, where you have complex exponential, and it costs you complex multiplications when you have to implement. So Hadamard is just addition and subtraction. That's the big gain in complexity. And we do see what the sequency domain is, but it doesn't have a physical meaning as the delayed Doppler domain. That's it's not matched. It just happens to work. Okay, that's my only explanation why the Hadamard is that it just works. But it has to be done with MRC detection and with the ZP structure.
Okay, thank you, Professor. Yeah.
Just maybe one more point to add on the transformations. We also here looked at, starting from OTFS that does some sort of channel compression, I would like to call it. So then we thought of looking into DCT transform also to compress further. But the problem there is that when you change the transformation, then you lose the nice properties of OTFS, that you have circular convolutions everywhere, which are quite important in practical implementations of the system, because eventually we want to have it working in fully operational communication system. So just looking into a word of caution, I would like to add in looking into different transformations. Like Hadamard transform has this nice dyadic convolution property there that is somehow useful. That's how it, in my understanding, it works. And also an important point about OTFS is that any single data symbol you transmit experiences exact same channel. That's why you can use isolated pilot and estimate the channel, while other transformations may not satisfy this condition.
Yes.
Can I add something small? I think it's an important point.
Of course.
I agree completely with everything that Emmanuel said and Armand said and Wei said. Just this is important. So as an engineering problem, if you are only focused on communication and fast equalization and spreading by means of detecting the modes of the channel, there are many, many twists that you can do. For example, replacing the precoding system from FFT to Hadamard. But if you want a consistent mathematical structure that gives you a framework to do signal processing as a whole, filtering, sampling, everything in a consistent manner, you cannot, it's very rigid. It's the ZAC and that's it. And I would say it because I want to contrast it with coming to the Fourier transform and trying to twist the Fourier transform. Nobody will, if you are interested in signal processing, you won't try to twist the Fourier transform, because when you twist the Fourier transform, everything breaks down, all the structure breaks down. Right. So you don't want to twist the ZAC transform for the same reason. But mathematics aside and practical kinds of considerations aside, different realities.
Okay, thank you, Ronnie.
Sorry, can I ask a follow-up questions? It is a question I want to ask after Emmanuel's talk. As Emmanuel mentioned that your proposed MRC-based rack receiver can handle the fractional Doppler or the symbol spreadings in the sequence dimension. As my understanding is that you you perform an MRC to combining the information in the Doppler or the sequence dimension, regardless of it is fractional or not. So my question is, why you using MRC? It is very similar to a spatial multiplexing or like a MIMO channel in the Doppler dimension or the sequence dimension. Maybe a zero forcing combining or something MMSE combining may have a better performance. Have you tried this before?
Well, we haven't tried other combining, but the problem there is to the information, each information symbol gets spread across, goes into different received symbols, samples. Why? So the MRC is needed to, from in each equation, there is an XI vector, symbol vector that you want to estimate. You want to, let's say, combine all the samples in the optimal way, and maximum ratio combining is the optimal way to combine multiple paths. When you have diversity combining techniques, MRC is the optimal diversity combining. And you do diversity combining when you have the same signal transmitted coming through different channels, and then they get a different fade and a different noise. When you want to combine that, the maximum ratio combining is optimal in that, for that reason. And we just apply it within the iterative decoder. So we just combine it that way. That's the reason for MRC doing that. Okay, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Given the time. Oh yeah.
If I could,
of course.
If I could add my 2 cents regarding the first question here, I think it's a very important and it's a big question. I don't have a direct answer, but I think for any modulation and pulse shaping, I'm talking about pulse shaping in time domain or time frequency domain. I'm only talking about pulse shaping. For any practical modulation, pulse shaping is very important. And as Ronnie mentioned in his talk, and the system has a bandwidth limited. You have to have a good pulse shaping and to get rid of, Nyquist pulse or other pulses to get rid of for ISI. But here I think it's more important because we are working for wireless system. If we don't get good pulse shaping, we will have a severe OB, outside the band emission. So for practical system, we probably need to do this one. We don't see many work here. I remember Emmanuel has one paper on this one, and probably is a kind of important area need to be taken.
Yes. Okay. Let's move on. So for the second page of OTFS principles, people are asking about the intrinsic relationships between OTFS, Zag transform, and short time Fourier transform. And there are also some questions about the achievable rates, and also is there a different design criteria for the number of grids in time domain, time frequency domain, or delay Doppler domain? Yes, please feel free to discuss.
I can start.
Yeah, of course.
OTFS is the Zag transform.
Okay.
Let's start with that. Let's build a very simple, mental point of view about OTFS. OTFS is the Zag transform. That's it. Period. No more deliberation. Okay. Once you understand that, you can move on and say, okay, can I approximate OTFS? Can I build approximate variants of OTFS that, or sometimes even equivalent, but typically these are approximate. And then you can approximate OTFS by means of symplectic Fourier transform and then OFDM. It's an approximation of OTFS. It's not the two of OTFS. It approximates OTFS in low velocity because it approximates the twisted convolution channel interaction with a circular convolution channel interaction. Okay, which maintains as long as the velocities are so this is this is really, I want to emphasize it. OTFS is the Zag transform, and this is where you have to start, and from there you branch.
Okay, thank you, Ronnie. So I have seen Professor Farhan has a paper talking about the achievable rates of OTFS and OFDM. Could you elaborate on this topic?
Yeah, just in that work, we looked at the capacity of OTFS in single antenna and MIMO scenarios. So our finding was that it's the same as OFDM. But the question is, where is OTFS winning? And I think other measures such as probability of outage and stuff like that can be looked at and calculated, and there could be the advantage of OTFS. There are other works I've seen that they show a bit higher sum rate from just a big Kyre's group recently, and that would be a good reference. But yeah, the rate is the same. Short answer there.
I can add my 2 cents about it. OTFS is an orthogonal modulation. It's unitarily equivalent to any other orthogonal modulation. In terms of capacity, abstract measure of capacity, OTFS has the same capacity as TDMN and OFDM. So that's on the information theoretic level. Yeah, they are all unitarily equivalent. Where the gain come from, it won't come from capacity measure. It will come from other means. One, from everything I've seen so far, one source of advantage is the fact that OTFS does not suffer inter-carrier interference. Namely, you can measure the channel, and then using the analytic formula of twisted convolution, you can equalize it using a message passing receiver in a manner that will give you uniform performance for any velocity. This is something that it's very difficult to implement in other modulations. That's one source of gain that I was able to
Thank you, Ronnie. I have just received some discussions regarding the exact same topic. People were asking, well, the correlated channel affect the capacity for both OTFS or OFDM? Is there, like, maybe generally speaking, if the channel condition is different, is there a possible difference between OTFS and OFDM in terms of the achievable rates?
I didn't understand the question. Again, what's the question?
Sorry, the question, I think what that means is like, if the channel has some specific, for example, correlations between different paths, will that affect the capacity for both OTFS or OFDM, maybe?
So is it about MIMO, maybe, that you have correlated channel different antennas? Or
yes.
Okay, so yeah, not sure.
I can say something about it. Again, it's not the work about MIMO in OTFS is in its infancy. There are some works, but there is one thing about MIMO that I can add. Typical, there are two types. So first of all, in order for OTFS to shine, you need to do nonlinear signal processing. Linear equalization in OTFS does not allow OTFS to shine over other modulation techniques. Okay. So you have to apply nonlinear processing, and by nonlinear processing I mean including subtraction, not only rejection. You don't want only to do zero forcing. You want to subtract. You want to do decision feedback. For example, and in precoding it means that you want to precode using Tomlinson-Arashima and not precode using. Now, when you do nonlinear processing, then of course OTFS has a distinct advantage that all the passes are separated from one another, and you can subtract them.
Yes.
And this is a principle. Again, it's not a proof, but this is a principle that can be exploited in the delay Doppler domain and cannot be exploited in the time frequency domain. In the time frequency domain, when you're trying to equalize or pre-equalize a MIMO channel, you cannot subtract because now the things are not separated. So you can only reject. You can do Tomlinson-Arashima to some extent, but it's a very degenerate form of Tomlinson-Arashima. It's only along the spatial domain. In OTFS, you can actually do Tomlinson-Arashima along delay, Doppler, and spatial domain. And this is a source of advantage.
I see.
And this should be done. You know, it's not, I'm not sure there are a lot of published work about this aspect.
Okay. Thank you, Ronnie.
Just
Ronnie,
on MIMO.
Sorry. Yeah, please.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay,
yes?
Sorry, just a follow-up, Ronnie, your suggestion. If we do termination pre-coding and you can also do regularized channel inversion as people did for conventional, what is it called, the OFDM-MIMO system.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any comparable performance or gain or loss in that?
Oh, nonlinear will always win against rejection. You can do regularize, you can do whatever. If you do nonlinear, you will gain. You will achieve capacity. All the rejection, regularized or not, will not achieve capacity. Will not achieve the MIMO capacity. The ones which are decision feedback, especially in the precoding, because decision feedback in the receiver have error propagation. Decision feedback in the precoding doesn't have error propagation. So when you do Tomlinson-Arashima, you achieve capacity. So it will give you better performance. Yeah,
I know if you do that interference THP precoding, and if you have quite a few passes, you probably need to do quite abstractions at the transmitter side. And
you have to do subtraction, that's true, but think about it. There is also another interesting attribute here. That subtraction is a cheap operation.
Yeah.
Subtracting the interference only means that you measure the channel, the downlink channel, and then you subtract the effect of the interfering symbol using your channel. You don't need to invert anything. You just need to subtract. Many subtractions, okay. And then after you subtract everything, you are left with some very simple matrix inversion, which is the residual thing that you need to actually invert. So in fact, subtraction, this paradigm of nonlinear signal processing, after a certain MIMO degree, can have lower complexity than the paradigm of inverting many matrices in the time frequency domain. So in the delay Doppler domain, all the complexity is moved into subtractions, which are cheap, and then you are left with an inversion of a single matrix. While in the time frequency domain, you are inverting many single matrices without subtraction, basically.
If you sorry, yeah, please go.
Yeah.
No, I just hi, I'm Yihong. So I just follow Jing Hong's question. So if you have multiple paths, you do THP. So it's typically related to the path, the magnitude. If it's very tiny path magnitude, so the inversion, I mean the THP. I mean, if your starting point is the THP, the magnitude is the path is very low magnitude. So will it bring the inaccuracy of THP precoding and it will bring the difficult?
We implement, okay, these are all very good questions. I can just say that we in Cohere actually implemented THP and built a system which delivered, already in 2017, delivered 16 layers over the air with 128 QAM using THP, and we were not being able to achieve that using any other means. It required THP. This does not answer your question. Your question is how sensitive is THP to all these effects. These are all things that needs to be rigorously investigated.
But I know THP, the good thing is if you did in the precoding part, then the receiver is very trivial. It's very simplified. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. No, I think it's a very appealing technology. It's a very appealing technology to be implemented in next generation. And I think delay Doppler is a perfect coordinate system to apply it in. Yeah.
When you do THP, Ronnie, and at the end of the day, are you going through the loops, say A to B, B to C, C to D, D probably going back to IU? When you have a loop, you probably
Oh yeah, these are all.
Okay.
Sorry, can I ask about one more question? Last question, maybe.
Sure.
Ronnie, is your THP being done in the delayed Doppler domain, right?
Yes.
And is this still applicable when fractional Doppler or delay happens?
No, this THP was implemented in the real system. So fractional, non-fractional, everything. You cannot assume anything. It's a THP again. It was a little bit simplified, if I remember correctly, along the Doppler. So it was THP mainly along the delay. So we did something. I think along the Doppler we did rejection. We didn't do subtraction. So because it was in the context of a fixed wireless access system. So we assume the Dopplers are small, and in general, on the Doppler, we only did rejection. But we did full THP along delay, fractional or non-fractional.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
It's crucial to have a good channel to see THP work properly. You need a relatively well-behaved channel. Otherwise, may not be as effective. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt. We actually have another section just talking about OTFS with MIMO. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the next. Yeah. So there's other questions talking about the channel estimation and the data transmission for OTFS, and also if the performance and the complexity is better than OFDM, and also how to cancel out the inter-cell interference in the delayed Doppler domain, while maintain delayed Doppler domain channel sparsity, and something like that. Please feel free.
There is more complexity to equalize OTFS. There are no free lunches. There is more complexity, but because of the great work of many people here, it's a manageable complexity. And so we are not. I don't think we can build a chip that implement this equalizer. And yes, and after you build the chip, you forget about the complexity. You already have a chip. And nobody asks the question anymore. So I think we are now in the position that one can build a chip that implement an equalizer for OTFS. But there is more complexity.
Yeah. But we are gaining mobility. You know, we are gaining high mobility. I mean, we are paying complexity to have a system which will work well in high mobility, and that's. I mean, you know, we were having, when we had OFDM. We gained the multipath and complexity. You know, they had to design chips with FFTs, with massive FFTs. So they paid that price because there was a reward, and I think there is a reward to make system work in high mobility.
Yeah,
and even when it's not high, even when the mobility is not high, OTFS works better because it has intrinsically some, you know, there is some diversity gain through OTFS, even in static channel.
I think there is many debate about OFDM because they said many questions will say you can increase delta F, carrier spacing, or add channel coding.
Very dangerous.
Very long channel codes. So no, I heard many questions about that.
I was, by the way, I was participating regretfully so in the 5G standard deliberation. I have a lot of stars on my back. Now you can achieve, you can tweak, you can do hacking to OFDM and resolve many problems as long as you isolate them. So you can solve the diversity problem in OFDM. You can interleave. And it will give you diversity gain equivalent to OTFS as long as the bandwidth and the durations are the same. You can solve intercarrier interference by increasing the subcarrier spacing. Okay, you can, but what happens? But then you have one sheet and it's short here and long there, because what happens when you increase the subcarrier spacing? You shrink the symbol time. What happens when you shrink the symbol time? The delay spread is the delay spread. So the cyclic prefix should stay the same, and the cyclic prefix overhead grows proportionally. So you cannot, either your legs or your head will be outside your blanket. So, and that's the problem. While in OTFS, you can achieve all these benefits, or you can hope to achieve all the benefits while covering all the parts of your body with the same blanket.
Yeah, just on the weak points side, I would like to add the guard band for the isolated pilot you put in there, especially when you have multi-user scenario. Yeah, that's not the most efficient way of doing things. Therefore, I mean, it's possible to use other type of pilots there. In fact, there is some work on superimposing a pilot with high power, so that in normal fashion type thing, you can just estimate the channel to interference cancellation. But that's a limitation in current literature that we need solutions for, basically.
Very good point.
Pilot can have a damaging effect also on the PAPR. So if you, of course, if you boost your pilot, then you will damage the PAPR of your signal. So that's
if you have isolated pilot though, because of zeros you put around it, you can add the power of those to this pilot, and then in delay time it gets the spread, right? So it has the same power as the rest of your signal. But yeah, you can't increase too much.
You will probably enlarge the guard band as well if you isolated the pilot there.
Yeah.
How about the intercell interference? Is there a way to deal with the intercell interference for OTFS?
I think, again, from the experience that I have from Cohere, I don't see specific advantages on one domain compared to the other. Intercell interference should be dealt with on the level of network. Probably cooperate, MIMO, or cooperation between the base stations. That's probably the way to go, and beamforming in one way or another. I don't see how delay Doppler, but maybe, I'm short-sighted. I am short-sighted, but maybe I'm also short-sighted in this
No.
But can I ask, does the pilot contamination exist in multi-cell OTFS systems?
That's a very good that's a very good point. Thanks, you. So one of the main problems with time frequency channels, think about it. The channel that you measure over a carrier is instantaneous channel. Instantaneous channel, and it is corrupted severely by contamination. And once it is corrupted, you are done. You are dead. So because you measure the channel is corrupted. It's a very unstable structure, the time frequency channel, because carrier by carrier, it's a different channel and corrupted by contamination and noise. In OTFS, the channel is much more stable. It is averaged. These are the reflectors. And think about it, the sensors, these reflectors are averaged over the full band and the full duration of the frame. So it's a much more stable measurement under contamination and noise. And this is something that we've seen, and we are taking advantage in all the implementations of OTFS. That's a very good point. So this is, I think, the core advantage of OTFS delay Doppler for multi-cell. The contamination of the channel measurements, which is a fundamental limitation of all these multi-celling systems.
Thank you, Ron.
I think I would like to add one more point that for intercell interference, you have if you consider OTFS is a two-dimensional spreading, you probably have the property of CDMA, and the interference is not in a big chunk in either like a TDMA or like FDMA. You have this big interference in particular time slot or particular frequency band. So interference is somehow averaged there. Probably it is more robust.
Yes.
That's intuitive. I'm not quite sure this is the case. I haven't done anything.
I agree with you. I'm short-sighted. Yeah, you are right. You are right. Aspect is the CDMA attributes of OTFS clearly have strong relation to behavior under multi-cell interference. That's for sure. What the behavior is different question, but for sure it will behave differently. I agree. I take back what I said in the beginning. These are two good points.
Yeah. Okay. On top of that, and Zhiqiang mentioned this pilot contamination. I think here your pilot is quite different. I mean, it really depends on the OTFS. Your pilot signal is just, as presented by Ronnie and Emmanuel. The pilot is there is quite different from the pilot sequence what we use to do here. I think you are in different. I'm not saying it's better or worse. I think probably need to investigate it. The design scenario will be quite different as what we did before.
I can add that the pilot, when we are putting, let's say we embed the pilot in delayed Doppler domain, this gets completely spread in time frequency, and even in time. So it does get spread a lot. So I think it can induce you may lose some pieces in time of that pilot, but I think it's still enough to reconstruct the channel. You may miss a few samples of the pilot, but you may still reconstruct the channel approximately with some limited error. So I have my intuition is that it should be less disturbed by intercell interference or on the pilot.
Yes. Thank you. Let's move on. Okay, now let's turn to OTFS-MIMO. There are quite a lot of questions regarding this one. So basically, they were talking about the low complexity pre-coding, which we actually have discussed a little bit before, and also the advantages and the challenges of OTFS in massive MIMO, and also how to design closed loop MIMO pre-coding, or say like more specifically in which domain should we design pre-coding. Okay.
So in terms of massive MIMO work, we recently looked at application of considering locally LTI channel in every M number of samples. And then we can estimate the channel in the middle of that. That's the best point to estimate the channel, that block of M samples, and consider the channel completely LTI, apply a simple time reversal technique to do for combining. It could, in terms of pre-coding, the story is different, but for combining, we are just using that, and we get the so-called channel hardening effects, and the correlation functions of the channel started to appear. So when we have time varying channel, a Bessel function appeared there as a result of the Doppler shift, and we simply could invert that effect and gain a lot of performance compared with the static case. So we could reach almost to static channel bit rate. So for the downlink, I believe for pre-coding this Bessel information, if you know the maximum Doppler shift or Doppler spread, let's say, you can use that Bessel function, so that when the signal from multiple antennas goes through the channel, it averages out to that function, and you can do pre-coding and get gains there for the downlink pre-coding. But still, this is a work in progress from our side, but the results are quite promising.
Thank you. Is there any any suggestions for the closed loop MIMO pre-coding, and maybe given the frame size, maybe it's the outdated CSI will be a problem for closed loop MIMO.
Not sure, because the channel is varying over time. So if there's a way to extrapolate, though, if there is a way to extrapolate, maybe there could be opportunities there, I would say.
I agree. I think it's really depending on if the channel is how stable the channel is. Yeah.
Okay. If I could add, I think when talking about the outdated CSI, as we are working on time delayed Doppler domain, and the channel is less outdated in delayed Doppler domain compared to you could quickly outdated in the time frequency domain.
That's a good
point.
Probably
that's something I can add. Yeah.
Yeah. And also for closed loop MIMO precoding, most straightforward is by exploiting the channel reciprocity to estimating the channel and doing the precoding design.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, let's keep going to some applications of OTFS. As OTFS has attracted a lot of attentions, people are thinking maybe it is okay to apply OTFS to other aspects. For example, like underwater communications, or for physical layer security, or even for radar sensing. I'm sure that there are some preliminary works have been done in those aspects. Perhaps you can elaborate on some of them, please.
Maybe I can talk. Yeah, Ronnie, please.
Okay, I will say a very short thing, and then you will take the substance. So first of all, there is work about underwater acoustic communication. The Doppler is accentuated there. In fact, I think in underwater communication, the Doppler shift is comparable. The bandwidth is comparable to the frequency, to the carrier frequency. So yes. You are dealing with a kind of acceleration there. But I think it's very suitable for this. It's very suitable for a situation where Doppler effects are accentuated because the carrier wavelength is much shorter. And the security purpose, OTFS is CDMA. Now, we didn't talk about it in this deliberation, but OTFS is not only spread in terms of sensing the channel mode. OTFS or variants of OTFS can actually be spread in terms of spread spectrum. You can actually build an OTFS variant. We didn't talk about this at all yet. You can build spread versions of OTFS, which actually smear over a larger bandwidth and over a large, really like CDMA, while maintaining all the OTFS attributes. And this has a application for security. So on different modes, you are secure on the level that you can communicate under the noise level. Just very, very low power communication and exploiting all the processing gain that this spread spectrum techniques gives you. And it's also security because you can use the spreading as a code to give you security to your transmission. And the comparison between OTFS and OFDM for sensing, it's an interesting question. I don't know what information theory have to say about that. Perhaps it have to say that all waveforms are as good as all other waveforms for sensing. It's like for some kind of abstract reason. But OTFS, if you don't know information theory and you just think about what OTFS is, it's the optimal radar waveform. That's what it is. It's like this is radar. If you go back into all the literature about radar and you try to translate it to something that you can understand, you will eventually you will come up with OTFS.
That's a very interesting point.
Yeah. And I want to say something more about radar because I thought about it. I don't know if this will be of interest for this audience, but I will say it anyhow. Radar have a fundamental problem in the definition of its problem. In radar theory, the main problem is designing signals which have specific ambiguity function.
Yeah. Right.
That's the problem in radar theory. For people from radar, you are trying to come up with waveforms which have specific ambiguity function, desired ambiguity function, typically some localization properties of the ambiguity function. This is a highly nonlinear problem. And there is no solution to this problem. There are some ad hoc constructions, but there is no systematic way to design radar signals under constraints on the ambiguity function. This is very important. It's not like designing filters, which is a linear problem. Designing radar waveform is a nonlinear problem which does not admit a solution. And I think this is a diversion. I think that radar problem is designing a delayed Doppler filter. That's the problem of radar. Radar theory is not about designing waveform of specific ambiguity function. Radar theory is designing delayed Doppler filters that you can decorate your delta in delayed Doppler.
Right.
And designing delayed Doppler filters is a linear problem. You can design any filter that you want while paying the bandwidth and duration that the filter will require. And this makes radar problem a linear problem. And I think that's the correct way to think about the radar problem. And this makes it solvable using traditional signal processing techniques. And for me, this was a big revelation. And I don't know how much it is well known in the community.
Thank you, Ronnie. You have mentioned a few very good points. I think they are quite enlightening. Do we have any elaborations on the? Oh yeah, of course.
Comment on that. That's really nice about radar. But I think the other big difference in radar that they are just interested. I mean, they don't really see the phase. While when we do OTFS delayed Doppler channel estimation, we get amplitude and phase of the channel. Now, I don't know, you eventually can use that maybe to do super resolution, or because by measuring that phase, you can kind of get a higher resolution effect on the radar. And probably that's what they do in radar. But now we have a tool that can estimate the magnitude and phase of each scatterer of the radar. That's an advantage. And I really like the point that Ronnie made, that now you remember the ZAC domain two-dimensional sync pulse, right? That's a sync pulse, and we know it's bad. It's not concentrated. You can shape that pulse to make it nicer and make it even more concentrated, so that the resolution of the radar is improved by shaping that pulse. And we know how to shape pulses very well, and that's your filter design. What you mentioned is exactly that. Thinking of that two-dimensional sync becomes something which has is maybe more concentrated, and yeah.
And you don't need to deal with ambiguity function and all these.
Yes, it's a nightmare. Ambiguity function for communication people, it's a nightmare. I struggle to really get down to the bottom of what it means. But yeah, that's true. That's true.
I think there could be one way to link radar and I mean, although we don't like, as a communication, we don't like the ambiguity function. I think in either Emmanuel or Ronnie's presentation, you linked them to the what is called the matched filter,
yes, the matched filter,
which both communication and radar people do. So somehow, if there's a link, also that is linked to the topic you mentioned, that is delta function, 2D delta functions. If we can link them together, probably that's a way to help to design.
In fact, I did it. I have to say, secretly, I was curious about it. So in fact, I have some private notes. So and again, I can give it to the audience as an exercise. I think everyone in this audience can solve it. Take a delayed Doppler pulse and calculate its ambiguity function. And what you are going to get is a very interesting ambiguity function. You are going to get an ambiguity. I will tell you the answer and you try to get it. And what you are going to get is an ambiguity function which looks like that. You have the time frequency grid, which is the reciprocal of the delay Doppler grid. Think about it. You have the delay Doppler grid, so you have the reciprocal time frequency grid. You will get an ambiguity function which is basically a very narrow pulse at 0, 0. And then repeated at every grid point. And the power is diminishing as you go to infinity. So you are going to get this kind of, you are going to get an ambiguity function which is very different than Gaussian. It's very narrow. It's a thumbnail at 0, 0 with an empty space around it, and then repeating over the grid points to infinity while the envelope is going down. And that's the kind of ambiguity function which is associated with delay Doppler pulses, and this is a very good ambiguity function for radar, as long as the velocities that you are measuring are smaller than the empty space around 0, 0.
That's a very good result.
It's very nice. No, it's just a computation. You just compute and you get.
Okay. Seems like we have quite a lot of interest for radar.
Yeah.
There's another section just talking about the connections of OTFS and the radar.
You should put that question in this section.
I should actually. Yeah. So basically, we have briefly discussed how to design OTFS in the radar system, and just a few questions, maybe more detailed, like how to do parameter estimation, and is there a very difficulty for OTFS to be implemented in ISAC, like integrated sensing and communication?
I think this is one of the greatest venues to study OTFS. If you ask me just, academically, investigating OTFS in the context of sensing and radar and parameter estimation, that's a wonderful place to be. It clearly it clearly gives you a fresh perspective about what the radar problem is, and it has high chances of giving you fresh perspective about every one of the problems which are specified. I'm not saying I have an answer to any one of them, but it's a wonderful place to be. If I would be a young researcher today, I would go there. I would just, that's something that for sure will yield results.
Okay.
I didn't answer any one of these questions.
No, that's totally fine. Those questions are very detailed.
But the answer is probably how to design OTFS in radar system. Well, that's a big question, but the answer is yes for all the questions. For radar, no, sorry, it's not yes. These are detailed questions. Sorry. All right, I said what I said.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I think I agree. I think we have pretty much covered all those questions, like for OTFS and the OFDM in radars. Let's move on. There's another one talking about hardware designs of implementation for the ISFT. Actually, I think this question is somehow related to the keynote presentations today where we talk about the ZAC transforms for the implementation. Maybe there's a way for a cheaper hardware complexity to implement.
I have my perspective, but I will not impose it on anybody on this panel. My perspective is that OTFS should be implemented using the ZAC transform. So you should build not using ISFT. OTFS should be implemented using the ZAC transform. So you should implement in hardware the ZAC transform. This is not so difficult. And you should implement in hardware all the signal processing. You should, I can envision a chip that solely devoted to delay Doppler signal processing. Like you have a chip doing signal processing, you have a chip doing delay Doppler signal processing, including ZAC transform and all of that. And one of the challenges, quote unquote, in implementing OTFS as it should, is that now you need to match it with existing standards, which actually use numerology and grids in time frequency. So how to marry the ZAG transform with the numerology and the grids in time and frequency, so that OTFS will be capable to be implemented in the context of the existing standards. You see, it's not realistic to think that OTFS, the ZAG transform, I believe that the standard, even the 6G, will incorporate the many of the numerologies that we see today in 5G. So, but it will allow new waveforms to come into the game, like OTFS. So you need to find a way to marry the ZAG transform with the framework of LT.
Yes.
That's my perspective.
Yeah, on this, we have all the elements required to build ZAG transform. What you do on the row-wise FFT for the transmitter implementation is simply a number of OFDM transmitters that you have in parallel, so you can take advantage of parallel processing then and just implement it. So all the elements are already there and chips are there to perform Fourier transform across the rows here, and then you interleave them, right? So you get OTFS modulation. And in fact, for implementation of it, it can be even if m times n is equal to the number of subcarriers of an OFDM block, then n is smaller than that, and even complexity of the modem design, not detection, is simpler than OFDM. So you can afford more complexity for your detection there.
Yes, I agree. Yeah. Speaking of the complexity, I actually just got a question from the audience asking for inverse discrete ZAG transform. Is there so far, is there a practical hardware implementation for OTFS using either ISFFT or inverse discrete ZAG transform?
The question is whether there is a chip that do it, or
I think so. Yeah, if there's a chip or a very mature way to do it.
No, not that I know. I know that Cohere implemented on FPGA OTFS, but a chip doing all this stuff, I don't think. I didn't hear about something like that.
Okay, thank you.
The transmitter is not so hard. I mean, it's just a set of DFTs, right? And they are of endpoint DFTs, right, by the rows. So in terms of complexity, it depends on m and n. So if n is smaller than m, you even reduce your complexity. But that depends on other. I mean, the choice of m and n, maybe we didn't really discuss much where you would want to use one or the other. But in terms of complexity, I think the problem is the complexity of the receiver, because there is a bit of extra work because we are processing two-dimensional signals which have interference. So we have to do. I mean, we vectorize everything, and it's still sparse. So there are many things that can be simple, but I think the real, when we look at the hardware problems, is that we have these massive frames. So if you need to store the whole massive frame and process that, and probably you need to buffer the next one while it's coming. So while you process one, and I guess the size of m and n is probably going to be limited by the hardware, because when you have very massive, we were looking at 2K OFDM, and then n is 128. So you easily blow up the size of memory, just the buffer to receive your signal, your sample. So that's big. But in terms of operation, is not much more complex than an iterative detection method. I mean, what's being used for CDMA is probably the CDMA receivers had to face a kind of a similar problem in doing multi-user detection. Is that complexity? I think it's a bit lower than a multi-user detection for CDMA in that sense.
Thank you very much.
I tend to agree with Emmanuel here. I think and all other panel members here, as a transmitter side, because you are using, usually we are using small n, so you can use this FFT parallel and have a low complexity. Receiver side, receiver is an issue, and due to this high mobility and high Doppler, but it really depends on what you compare. If you compare OFDM, if your OFDM working in high mobility environment, you do need to do similar thing to deal with the Doppler issue. So complexity is an issue there as well. And I from another angle, I think latency probably is the issue here. And I haven't seen any much work in that direction. Maybe people can think about the smart ways to deal with the latency. And even with zero padding, if you put it, say, if you put a zero padding or CP in each block, you are probably similar to pre-coded OFDM. So I don't see the complexity issue there either. So in that case, it's still latency from my point of view.
Latency because of the equalization taking more time?
I think you estimated the channel and...
Estimating the channel is just reading the information from a specific region in delay Doppler.
Yeah.
So let's say that you have the channel.
Yeah,
but,
say if you need an accurate Doppler, it's a bit a long time, but I think this is the same for OFDM as well.
Oh yeah, it's the same. So let's say that we agree under the latency requirement of your system, you have a certain Doppler resolution and certain in the bandwidth. So under these constraints, measuring the channel is fast. And then the source of latency is the iterations of the receiver. You need this iterated receiver. But I think, again, from the input that I got from the engineer that I talked with, this is now achievable. These receivers can be implemented in hardware today.
The MRC receiver doesn't need many iteration. It converges pretty fast. That's once you give it a good initial estimate, which is obtained by the single tap equalization. So you basically, once you have, you get a single tap equalization, which is the same cost as the OFDM, and then you iterate on that, and the complexity is just mn times L, the number of delays. So that's I don't think that you can go any lower than that. You kind of got rid of the Doppler, multiple Doppler for each delay, but once you go to there, there's not much less to do. It's decision feedback in the end, and just the way we combine, maybe it's optimal. That's because of the MRC. But then that's the reasonable complexity. I mean, we can run simulation of massive size without problem. So, and even with multiple antenna, it can be done. So in terms, we don't need a supercomputer. We can run it on a desktop. So it's kind of promising that a chip could do that in real time. I would hope so. Now, and
on latency, I would say because we need to wait for mn number of samples to be received, we don't have symbol by symbol detection. That could be one source of it, which can be easily taken care of by adjusting m and n. So and also I think in terms of, there was a question on how to choose m and n. I think personally there should be a balance between them, because we want to, m gives us the diversity in terms of the frequency diversity, if you like, and then time diversity is taken from n dimension. So there, because of that, there should be some balance there. Yes. But yeah, that's the designer's choice, I'd say.
Yes.
So there will be a trade-off between M&N and the latency and the transmission time.
Yes, and increase the latency.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so just allow me to thank you for this discussion, and because the time is up, and so the Professor Peter will do a concluding remark on behalf of the CTTC, and maybe we can continue the discussion later. Yeah. Okay.
Thanks.
So Peter, there.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for organizing this, and thank you for the speakers and the panelists for the seminar. So I joined a little bit later because 7 o'clock in Europe was not the optimal time. But I actually participated I was listening to the panel discussion. It was very interesting. So I will not repeat too many things. Just to say that from what the panelists said, it seems that we are redefining our understanding of time and frequency in wireless communications, which is a great venue for further research. And also, as Ronnie mentioned, this is very suitable for joint sensing and communication, which is one of the, I would say, one of the most distinctive topic beyond 5G. I don't know whether we should say 6G or not. So I think in that sense, it's very relevant and timely. Also, I have to say that when we are thinking about these 2+1 events in CTTC, we were actually thinking of 90 minutes in total, 20 minutes presentation, 20 minutes, and then 45 minutes panel, because we thought people will just drop out. But here I can see that there are more than 130 participants staying a lot of 3.5 hours, which I will have to probably rethink. Either this topic was too interesting, or in general, CTTC should make the longer meeting. So thank you very much.
I have to tell you, there are not too many opportunities to give a talk which is long enough so that you can actually explain. So this is a great venue to actually study a topic. It has a great potential.
Yeah, okay, great. Yes. Great. This is a great input, because I think you have two things. Either you can go to the topic in details, as you say, and you have your time to do a semi-tutorial, or you invite speakers that would highlight just some points. For example, last time we had terahertz communication. We had one comm theorist, one hardware practitioner, and then these are completely opposite viewpoints. So that's why they presented it briefly, and then there was a discussion between them. But here you are both experts on OTFS, and of course you went into details, which is so it probably depends on the topic that we are going to deal with, right, and the guests. But my point is that another feedback for me as a vice chair of CTC is that this format is acceptable as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Peter. I think probably we have too many questions, which is a good thing.
Yes,
yes,
very interesting.
It's very impressive, the amount of involvement. It's very nice.
Okay, just to tell you that we are going to organize another event like this in January, so stay tuned for which topic that will be.
Okay.
Now I have a question about this this environment. So it also serves as a platform for paper submissions or articles. How does it, or only for? So
no, this is the so the thing is that we are organizing normally the communication theory workshop. So the Communication Theory Society does mostly two technical things: organize the communication theory workshop and sponsors the communication theory symposia at Globecom and ICC. But this last year we could not have the workshop. So when I was appointed as a vice chair, I thought, how do we keep things going without this? And then of course there were also too many online events, so we had to think about a different format. And having just one person talking, maybe it's not the format, so that's why we have 2 or more people joining. So this is how this format came. And when the pandemic is hopefully soon over, I hope we can still keep this format, you know, to connect with people once in 2 months or something.
Oh yeah, I think it's great.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks for organizing. I really personally enjoyed all the discussions, and everyone talks in the same language. That's great. That's the best part.
Yes.
We are in the same domain. Like,
Thank you.
A lot of attendees.
I think it was mostly
to organize this very important. But just stay in tune. We have, I think this year we organized the ICC first OTFS workshop at the ICC.
Yeah.
We proposed the second workshop. We slightly changed the name to be OTFS and the delayed Doppler domain signal processing. I think a lot of signal processing issues are relevant. So there will be, I think we proposed for the ICC next year to 2022.
Yes.
So please submit the papers for all the audience. I think
yes,
there
and
will
the
be a lot
deadline
of...
is January 20.
Yeah. Okay.
Wonderful.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I think mostly thanks to Wei Jie and Shuangyuan for organizing this, because it was their initiative.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for. Yeah. Thank you.
Peter, maybe we can continue discussing in this Zoom
if
channel.
There's enthusiasm for that, yes.
Ronnie is very late.
Yeah, I think
yes.
I'm already crossed my flipping zone. I'm floating in space now.
So Ronnie, what time in Texas now?
It's almost 4 a.m.
4 a.m.
Oh.
You can wake up.
4 a.m. Wow.
Okay.
Okay.
It's fine.
Okay.
That's the excessive delay domain.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
It's up to you, Wei Jie. Maybe it's good to conclude for the speakers, because
no problem. Yeah, thanks, Peter.
Yeah, maybe I think Shuangyuan and Wei Jie, if you have collect other questions, probably can circulate and the people can exchange by emails as well.
Sure.
Yeah,
of course.
yeah.
There are quite a lot of questions. Yes.
Yes.
And Emanuele and Ronnie, please, if possible, provide your slides so we can put them on the CCTC webpage.
So I will send my slides to Shuangyuan.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks.
Yes. Do the
Thanks.
same. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
And also some audience has asked if the recorded videos can be shared.
Oh, everything was recorded. Interesting. Yeah.
Okay.
If you didn't say anything controversially on the recording, so we can.
I'm not sure. So if Ronnie and Emmanuel agrees.
I am fine.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know. I am.
It's okay.
Okay,
it's okay.
Thank you.
I mean, once you have the slide, it's the same.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what we are going to do? You're
not
going
the
to post it on YouTube? What? So once you get.
Oh yeah. We will upload it to YouTube.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a great venue. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, very good.
Okay. Thank you all.
Okay.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you all. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Emmanuel.
Thank you.
Nice to see you, Peter.
Bye.
Yes.
Thank you. We've been
Nice to see you. Bye.
Yes.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for the good discussion.
Bye.
Thank you all the audience as well.
Yeah.
Thank you to all the audience. Yeah.